The fluorescent lights of Rosie's diner flickered overhead, casting shadows across the cracked linoleum floor that Sophia Martinez had mopped at least a dozen times tonight. Her feet ached in the cheap sneakers she'd bought from the clearance rack 3 months ago, the soles already wearing thin from 14-hour shifts that barely covered rent on her studio apartment in the Pilsen neighborhood. She wiped down the counter for the 3rd time, watching the clock above the cash register tick toward 11 p.m. Wednesday nights were always slow, which meant small tips and an even smaller paycheck this week. The calculator in her mind never stopped running these days. Rent was due in 5 days, $375 short. The electric bill sat unopened in her purse because looking at it wouldn't make money appear. And her phone had been making that concerning buzzing sound again, the one that meant the screen was probably going to die soon, taking with it her only connection to potential catering gigs that might help dig her out of this hole. The bell above the door chimed, and Sophia looked up with the practiced smile she'd perfected over 2 years of service work. A middle-aged couple stumbled in, their laughter too loud and their clothes too expensive for this part of town, probably lost on their way to one of the trendy restaurants that were slowly gentrifying the neighborhood, pushing out places like Rosie's and people like Sophia. "Sit anywhere," she called, grabbing 2 menus from behind the counter. "If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you." She took their order with mechanical efficiency, her mind still doing math. If she picked up an extra shift on Sunday, and if Mrs. Chen needed her to cater that anniversary party she'd mentioned, and if her car made it another month without needing repairs, maybe she could make rent, maybe. The couple left 20 minutes later, abandoning a $7 tip that felt like both a blessing and an insult. Sophia pocketed the bills and returned to wiping down tables, preparing for closing. That's when her phone buzzed. Tyler's name flashed across the cracked screen, and Sophia's stomach clenched with familiar dread. She shouldn't answer. She'd blocked him 3 times already, and somehow he always found a new number. But experience had taught her that ignoring Tyler only made things worse. "What do you want?" she said quietly, glancing toward the kitchen where her manager, Joe, was doing prep work for tomorrow. "Baby, don't be like that." Tyler's voice dripped with false sweetness, the same tone he used right before his mood shifted. "I just want to talk. You blocked me again. Because you won't stop calling. I miss you. We were good together, Soph. You know we were." Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened window, a thin woman with dark circles under her brown eyes, her black hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing a uniform that smelled like grease despite multiple washings. She barely recognized herself anymore. 2 years ago, she'd been finishing her culinary degree, full of dreams about opening her own restaurant someday. Then her mother got sick. The hospital bills came, the student loans went into default, and Tyler had been there, offering comfort that slowly transformed into control. "Tyler, we broke up 8 months ago. You need to move on." 8 months and 12 days, he corrected, and something in his precision made her skin crawl. "I've been keeping track, counting every day you've made us both suffer. There is no us. There hasn't been for a long time." The laugh that came through the phone raised the hair on her arms. "You really think you can just walk away from me? After everything I did for you? The money I gave you for your mom's treatment?" Sophia's jaw clenched. He'd loaned her $3,000 when she was desperate, and he'd been holding it over her head ever since. Never mind that she'd paid back twice that amount in the emotional toll of his jealousy, his surveillance, his slowly escalating need to know where she was every moment of every day. "I'm paying you back," she said. $50 a month, just like we agreed. I don't want money, Sophia. I want you." "That's not going to happen." "We'll see about that." The line went dead, leaving Sophia staring at her phone with shaking hands. She knew that tone, knew the quiet threat underneath his words. Tyler worked as a supervisor at a shipping warehouse, which meant he had connections she didn't, resources she couldn't match. The last time she'd tried to date someone else, Tyler had somehow gotten the guy fired from his construction job. When she'd threatened to call the police, Tyler had reminded her about the loan, about how he had texts from her begging for money, about how easy it would be to make her look like she'd scammed him. Joe emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. "You okay, kid?" Sophia forced a smile. "Fine, just tired. Why don't you head out? I can finish closing." She wanted to argue she needed every hour she could get, but exhaustion won. "Thanks, Joe." 20 minutes later, Sophia stepped out into the Chicago night, pulling her thin jacket tighter against the October cold. Her car, a battered Honda Civic held together by duct tape and prayer, sat in the alley behind the diner. She was halfway there when she saw it. A black SUV idled at the mouth of the alley, its headlights off but its engine running. Sophia's steps faltered. It was probably nothing, just someone waiting for a friend. But Tyler's call had left her rattled, and Chicago alleys at night weren't known for their safety. She quickened her pace, keys already in hand. Almost there, just 20 more feet. The SUV's passenger door opened. Sophia ran. Her cheap sneakers slapped against wet pavement as she bolted back toward the street, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, she heard car doors opening, heavy footsteps giving chase. She shouldn't have parked in the alley. She should have asked Joe to walk her out. She should have arms grabbed her from behind, yanking her off her feet. "Let me go!" she screamed, thrashing and kicking, her purse falling to the ground and spilling its contents across the grimy pavement. "Shut up," a male voice growled in her ear. "Tyler just wants to talk." Terror and fury flooded her system in equal measure. Of course it was Tyler. Of course he'd escalated from threatening phone calls to sending his warehouse buddies to grab her off the street. She opened her mouth to scream again, but a hand clamped over her face, cutting off the sound. "Get her in the car," another voice said. "Quick, before someone sees." Sophia bit down hard on the palm covering her mouth, tasting blood. The man cursed and loosened his grip just enough for her to wrench free and stumble forward. She made it 3 steps before they caught her again, dragging her backward toward the waiting SUV. This was it. This was how she died. In a Chicago alley behind a diner, because she dared to leave a man who thought he owned her. Then she saw it. A sign across the street, illuminated by warm golden light. The Castello, a restaurant so expensive Sophia had never even dreamed of eating there. People in evening gowns and tuxedos were arriving in a steady stream, disappearing through tall glass doors into what looked like another world entirely. A world Tyler's men wouldn't dare follow her into. Sophia stopped fighting. Her body went limp with feigned surrender, and the man holding her relaxed his grip slightly, probably thinking she'd given up. Instead, she stomped hard on his instep with her heel, driving all her weight down. He howled and released her. She ran. Not back toward the diner, not toward her car, but across the street, toward the Castello and its golden light, and well-dressed patrons who represented safety even if they'd probably call security the moment they saw her. The doorman, a mountain of a man in a pristine suit, was checking names on a clipboard. Sophia didn't slow down. She ducked around him and burst through those glass doors before he could react, stumbling into warmth and light and the smell of expensive food that made her stomach clench with hunger despite her terror. The restaurant was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from a soaring ceiling painted with Renaissance-style frescoes. White marble floors gleamed beneath her scuffed sneakers. Round tables draped in cream linens filled the main dining area, but most of the restaurant's occupants were gathered toward the back, where an arch of white roses and trailing ivy marked what was clearly a wedding reception in progress. Sophia pressed herself against the wall beside a tall potted palm, trying to catch her breath and make herself invisible. Around her, Chicago's elite barely glanced her way, too absorbed in their own conversations and their expensive champagne. She stuck out like a bloodstain on white silk in her grease-stained diner uniform, but no one was calling security yet. Through the glass doors behind her, she could see Tyler's men conferring with the doorman. Any moment now, they'd either convince him to let them in, or they'd wait for her to come out. She was trapped, unless she could blend in somehow. Sophia smoothed her ponytail and tried to look purposeful as she walked toward the wedding reception. Maybe if she just acted like she belonged here, if she grabbed a tray and pretended to be catering staff, she could make her way to a back exit before anyone— "Excuse me," a woman's voice, sharp as a blade. "Who are you?" Sophia turned to face a stunning woman in her mid-50s, wearing a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than Sophia's monthly rent. Her silver hair was swept back in an elegant chignon, and her ice-blue eyes assessed Sophia with the cold efficiency of someone used to identifying threats. I work for the catering company," Sophia improvised desperately. "Just arrived." The woman's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. "Dressed like that?" There was a mix-up with the uniforms. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. "Security," the woman said, not loudly, but with the kind of authority that made 3 men in dark suits immediately turn their attention her way. Panic shot through Sophia's chest. If they threw her out, Tyler's men would be waiting. She opened her mouth to beg, to explain, to say anything that might help, but before she could speak, a different voice cut through the tension. Maria, is there a problem? The crowd seemed to part instinctively, creating a clear path for the man who approached. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled his immaculate black tuxedo perfectly. Dark hair, expertly cut, with just a hint of silver at the temples. His face was all sharp angles and strong lines, the kind of devastating masculine beauty that belonged on magazine covers or movie screens, not in real life. But it was his eyes that held her frozen in place, dark brown, almost black, and when they locked onto hers, Sophia felt like she'd touched a live wire. This was a man accustomed to being obeyed, to being feared. This girl claims she's with catering, Maria said, her tone dripping skepticism. But she's clearly not. She's with me, the man interrupted smoothly, and Sophia's heart stuttered. Maria's eyes widened slightly. Marco, surely you can't— She's with me, he repeated, his voice dropping several degrees in temperature. Not a suggestion, a command. Marco. Sophia's mind raced. She'd heard that name before, whispered in the diner by customers reading newspapers. Marco Castellano, one of Chicago's most powerful businessmen, though the tabloids loved to hint at connections to less legitimate enterprises. The kind of man who owned half the city's restaurants, its docks, its construction companies. The kind of man who smiled for charity galas while rumors swirled about bodies in the Chicago River. And he'd just claimed her as his. Maria's lips pressed into a thin line, but she stepped back. Of course. My apologies. She shot Sophia one more withering look before gliding away, her security detail following like well-trained dogs. Sophia stood paralyzed, unsure whether she should thank Marco Castellano or run from him. Before she could decide, he stepped closer, near enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin. You're shaking, he observed, his voice lower now, meant only for her ears. I thank you, but I should go. His hand wrapped around her wrist, gently but with unmistakable possession. Not painful, but inescapable. I don't think so. Those men outside are still waiting for you. Her blood turned cold. You saw them? I see everything that happens near my establishments. His dark eyes studied her face with unsettling intensity. Someone is hunting you, and you ran into my restaurant for protection. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to crash your— Is this your wedding? The question emerged, strangled as she noticed the arch of roses, the cake table, the guests in formal attire. Something flickered across his face, amusement mixed with something darker. My nephew's wedding, I'm merely hosting. His thumb brushed across the inside of her wrist, probably feeling her racing pulse. What's your name? Sophia. Sophia Martinez. Beautiful name. He said it like he was tasting it, testing how it felt in his mouth. Tell me, Sophia Martinez, why are men with cheap suits and cheaper tactics hunting you through Chicago streets? She wanted to lie, to deflect, but those dark eyes saw too much. My ex-boyfriend, he won't accept that I left him. And these men work for him? He has connections. Guys from his warehouse job. Marco's expression darkened. Warehouse thugs. The contempt in his voice was absolute, terrorizing a woman in my territory. He released her wrist only to offer his arm, the gesture somehow both old-fashioned and commanding. You'll stay as my date for the evening. That should send a clear message to anyone watching. I can't. I'm not dressed for this, isn't. You're under my protection now, he interrupted, and there was steel beneath the velvet of his voice. Which means you'll do exactly as I say, starting with accepting my arm and walking with me into that reception like you belong here. Every instinct screamed that she was making a terrible mistake, that she was trading one dangerous situation for another, potentially worse one. But Tyler's men were outside, and Marco Castellano was offering her sanctuary, even if it came with strings she couldn't yet see. Sophia placed her hand on his arm, feeling expensive fabric and hard muscle beneath. Just for tonight? His smile was slow and devastating. We'll see. He led her through the crowd, and Sophia watched in fascination as people instinctively moved aside, their conversations pausing mid-sentence as Marco passed. Some looked curious. Others looked afraid. All of them looked at her like they were trying to solve a puzzle, trying to understand what a woman in a diner uniform was doing on Marco Castellano's arm. Try to relax, he murmured as they approached the wedding party. You look like you're walking to your execution. I might be, she whispered back. His laugh was unexpected, rich and genuine. Honest. I like that. They stopped in front of the bride and groom, a couple in their mid-20s who looked nervous despite their elegant attire. The bride's eyes widened when she saw Sophia, but she was too well trained to question Marco aloud. "Uncle Marco," the groom said, his voice tight. "We didn't realize you'd be bringing a date. Last-minute decision. Antonio." Marco's hand moved to the small of Sophia's back, possessive and warm through the thin fabric of her uniform. "This is Sophia Martinez." "Sophia, my nephew Antonio and his new wife, Gianna." "Congratulations," Sophia managed, though her mouth felt dry as sand. Gianna recovered first, her smile brittle but present. "Thank you. We're so glad you could join us." The words were polite, but her eyes asked 100 questions Sophia had no answers for. A waiter appeared with champagne, and Marco handed her a glass. "Drink," he instructed quietly. "It'll help." She took a sip, letting the bubbles and alcohol warm her from the inside. Around them, the wedding reception continued, though Sophia could feel eyes on her constantly, watching, judging, wondering who she was and how she'd earned Marco Castellano's attention. "They're all staring," she said. "Let them." Marco guided her toward a table near the back, away from the main festivities. When she stumbled slightly in her worn sneakers, his arm tightened around her waist, steadying her. "Sit." She sank into a chair that probably cost more than her entire apartment. Marco took the seat beside her, angling his body toward hers in a way that felt protective and predatory in equal measure. "Those men outside," he said, his tone conversational but his eyes deadly serious. "Give me a name." "Tyler Brennan. But you don't need to. Address?" "Marco, really, I appreciate your help, but I can handle." He leaned closer, near enough that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Sophia, do you understand who I am?" Her throat worked. "I've heard rumors." "Then you know that when I say I'll handle something, it gets handled." His voice was soft, almost gentle, but there was iron underneath. "No one terrorizes women in my city. Give me the address." She should refuse. Should. Thank him for the temporary shelter and find another way to deal with Tyler. But she was so tired of being afraid, so exhausted from running and scraping by and watching over her shoulder every moment of every day. 3215 West Jackson, she whispered. Second-floor apartment. Marco pulled out his phone, sleek, expensive, probably encrypted, and typed something with quick efficiency. Within seconds, it buzzed with a response. He read it, nodded once, then put the phone away. "It's done." "What's done?" His smile was dark and satisfied. "Tyler Brennan will no longer be a problem. By morning, he'll understand that you're under my protection, and that touching you means dying in a way that makes the Chicago River seem merciful." Sophia's stomach dropped. People don't just... In my world, they do. He lifted his champagne glass in a small toast. "Welcome to it, Sophia Martinez. Whether you meant to crash this wedding or not, you're staying as my date. And something tells me," his eyes roamed her face with unnerving intensity, "that this is going to be far more interesting than watching my nephew's boring reception." The wedding reception swirled around Sophia like a fever dream. Waiters in crisp white jackets glided between tables with trays of food that looked like edible art, delicate pasta arrangements, perfectly seared scallops, tiny desserts that probably cost more than her hourly wage. The champagne in her glass kept mysteriously refilling itself, though she couldn't remember anyone pouring it. Marco had disappeared 15 minutes ago, called away by a phone call that made his expression go cold and hard. He gestured to a man in a dark suit, one of many who seemed to orbit him like satellites, and said simply, "Watch her." Then he'd vanished into a private room off the main dining area, leaving Sophia alone at their table with her champagne and her racing thoughts. The man watching her stood 10 feet away, his back to the wall, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd. He was massive, with the build of someone who'd spent years turning violence into a profession. Every few seconds, his gaze would flick to her, making sure she hadn't moved. Sophia took another sip of champagne, trying to process what had just happened. Marco Castellano had claimed her as his date, had promised to handle Tyler in a way that made the Chicago River seem merciful, had stationed a bodyguard to watch over her like she was something precious and fragile that might shatter if left unattended. She should be terrified. Should be looking for the nearest exit and planning her escape. Instead, for the first time in 8 months, she felt safe. The realization made her want to laugh and cry simultaneously. What did it say about her life that a rumored crime lord felt safer than her ex-boyfriend? That sitting in a room full of dangerous people in expensive clothes felt more secure than her own apartment? "You're Marco's new girl?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. Sophia looked up to find a woman in her early 30s standing beside the table. She wore a red dress that hugged every curve, her black hair falling in glossy waves past her shoulders. Beautiful, confident, and looking at Sophia with barely concealed hostility. "I'm not his we just met, right?" The woman's laugh was sharp. "And he just happens to station Luca to watch you like the crown jewels? Sweetheart, I've been trying to get Marco's attention for 2 years. Then you show up in a..." Her eyes raked over Sophia's diner uniform with unconcealed disdain. "Whatever that is, and suddenly you're sitting at his private table." Sophia felt heat creep up her neck. "I didn't ask for any of this." "Sure you didn't." The woman leaned closer, her perfume overwhelming in its intensity. "Let me give you some advice. Marco Castellano doesn't do relationships. He does transactions. Whatever you think is happening here, you're just another business arrangement. He'll use you for whatever purpose you serve, then discard you like yesterday's newspaper. Isabella." The bodyguard Luca spoke for the first time, his voice a low rumble of warning. "Mr. Castellano wouldn't appreciate you harassing his guest." Isabella straightened, shooting Luca a venomous look before turning back to Sophia. "Just remember I warned you." She stalked away, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Sophia's hands were shaking again. She set down her champagne glass before she could spill it. Maybe Isabella was right. Maybe she'd jumped out of Tyler's frying pan straight into Marco's fire. What did she really know about this man except that he was powerful enough to make people afraid and wealthy enough to own restaurants like the Castello? "Don't listen to her." Luca had moved closer, though he maintained a respectful distance. "Isabella Russo has been chasing the boss for years. She's jealous." "The boss," Sophia repeated. "That's what you call him?" "That's what he is." Luca's expression was unreadable. Head of the Castellano family. Controls most of Chicago's waterfront, construction, and hospitality industries. "Hospitality industries," Sophia said flatly. "That's a nice way of saying organized crime." Luca's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. Miss Martinez, in Chicago, legitimate business and organized crime stopped being separate things about 50 years ago. Mr. Castellano just happens to be better at both than anyone else. Before Sophia could respond, Marco emerged from the private room. His expression was thunderous, jaw tight and eyes blazing with barely contained fury. 2 men flanked him, speaking in rapid Italian that Sophia couldn't follow. Whatever had happened in that phone call, it hadn't been good news. Then his gaze found her across the room, and something shifted. The fury didn't disappear, but it banked somehow, controlled and channeled rather than explosive. He crossed the space between them, and with predatory grace, dismissing his associates with a sharp gesture. "We're leaving," he said, offering his hand. Sophia stared at it. "What? Why?" "Because I have business that can't wait, and I'm not leaving you here unprotected." When she hesitated, his expression softened fractionally. "Please, Sophia, trust me for 1 more hour." That word "please" from a man who clearly wasn't accustomed to asking for anything made her decision. She placed her hand in his, letting him pull her to her feet. "If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one." Marco led her through the restaurant, Luca and 2 other bodyguards forming a protective formation around them. They exited through a rear door that opened onto a private parking area where a black Bentley waited, its engine already running. "Get in," Marco instructed, holding the rear door open. Sophia slid across leather seats so soft they felt like butter. Marco settled beside her, and Luca took the driver's seat. The other 2 bodyguards climbed into a separate SUV that pulled out ahead of them. "Where are we going?" Sophia asked as they merged into Chicago traffic. "Somewhere safe." Marco was typing rapidly on his phone, his jaw still tight with tension. "There's been a complication with the Brennan situation." Her stomach clenched. "Tyler? What happened?" "My men went to his apartment. He wasn't there." Marco's eyes finally lifted from his phone to meet hers. "But they found something interesting. A wall covered in photographs of you. Surveillance notes tracking your movements for the past 3 months. And a collection of burner phones with messages to several known enforcers from the Giordano family." The blood drained from Sophia's face. "The Giordano family? I don't understand. The Giordanos are my primary competition in Chicago," Marco explained, his voice carefully controlled. "They've been trying to move into my territories for the past year. If Tyler Brennan has connections to them..." He paused, studying her face. "Sophia, how long have you known him?" 2 years. We dated for about 18 months before I left him." "And when did he loan you the money?" 14 months ago. My mother needed surgery, And I was drowning in medical bills. She stopped, realization dawning with sickening clarity. You think he targeted me? On purpose? Marco's expression was grim. I think Tyler Brennan might have been planted in your life as a way to gather information about my operations. But I don't know anything about your operations. I didn't even know who you were until tonight. Do you work anywhere besides the diner? I do catering sometimes. Private parties, corporate events. Her breath caught. Oh God. Last month I catered a retirement party at Castellano Construction, and in July, I worked a charity gala at the Marcello. My restaurant, Marco confirmed. And if you were catering, you would have had access to private areas. You could have overheard conversations, seen documents left unattended, photographed security systems. Sophia felt like she might be sick. Tyler always asked detailed questions about my catering jobs, where I was working, who attended, what I overheard. I thought he was just being controlling and jealous, but he was gathering intelligence. Marco's hand found hers, his grip warm and grounding. Which means you're not just a woman running from an abusive ex, Sophia. You're a loose end the Giordanos will want to tie up. The Bentley pulled through gates into what looked like a private estate. Tall brick walls topped with security cameras, manicured lawns illuminated by discreet lighting, and at the end of a long driveway, a mansion that made the Castello look modest by comparison. This is your home? Sophia whispered. One of them. The car stopped in front of massive double doors. Welcome to your new residence for the foreseeable future. I can't just move into your house. Marco's eyes were hard as obsidian. You can, and you will. The moment Tyler realizes his cover is blown, he'll report back to the Giordanos. They'll assume you've been feeding me information, which makes you both an asset they want to reclaim and a witness they want to eliminate. He cupped her face with surprising gentleness. I won't let either of those things happen. Luca opened the car door, and Marco guided Sophia out into the cool night air. The mansion loomed above them, all elegant stonework and glowing windows that suggested warmth and safety inside. Or a very beautiful cage. They entered through doors that probably weighed more than her car. The interior was breathtaking, soaring ceilings, gleaming hardwood floors, and artwork that looked like it belonged in museums. A grand staircase swept upward to the second floor, and Sophia could see glimpses of multiple rooms branching off from the main foyer. An elderly woman appeared, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a simple black dress and sensible shoes. Her dark eyes assessed Sophia with keen intelligence. Rosa, this is Sophia Martinez, Marco said. She'll be staying with us. Please prepare the blue guest suite and find her something more comfortable to wear. Rosa's expression didn't flicker. Of course, Mr. Castellano. Miss Martinez, if you'll follow me? Sophia looked at Marco, suddenly uncertain. He'd been her anchor through the chaos of the past few hours, and the thought of being separated from him made anxiety spike in her chest. He seemed to sense her hesitation. I have calls to make, security to arrange. But I'm not going anywhere, Sophia. You're safe here. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this beautiful mansion wasn't just another form of prison. But Tyler had taught her that safety was often an illusion, and men who promised protection usually wanted something in return. Still, what choice did she have? Sophia followed Rosa up the grand staircase, acutely aware of her scuffed sneakers on the polished wood. They walked down a hallway lined with paintings, landscapes mostly, rendered in oils that captured light with impossible beauty. You appreciate art, Rosa observed, noticing her lingering gaze. I wanted to study it once, Sophia admitted. Before life got complicated. Rosa made a thoughtful sound but didn't press. She opened a door to reveal a bedroom that made Sophia's entire apartment look like a closet. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in silk linens the color of summer sky. Windows overlooked gardens lit by subtle landscape lighting. An ensuite bathroom was visible through another door, all marble and gold fixtures. Mr. Castellano keeps various sizes of clothing for guests, Rosa said, opening an enormous closet to reveal racks of designer labels. Please choose whatever you'd like. I'll have your uniform cleaned if you wish to keep it. Thank you. Sophia's voice came out smaller than she intended. Rosa moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Martinez, I've worked for the Castellano family for 35 years. I've seen Mr. Marco angry, ruthless, and cold. I've seen him destroy enemies without hesitation. She met Sophia's eyes. But tonight, when he looked at you in that restaurant, I saw something I've never seen before. Protectiveness, yes, but also curiosity, interest. Be careful with that. I'm not trying to fash. I didn't ask for any of this. I know. Rosa's expression softened. That's probably why he's interested. In Marco's world, everyone wants something from him. You're the first person in years who's wanted nothing except safety. She smiled faintly. Get some rest, child. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. After Rosa left, Sophia stood in the center of the luxurious bedroom, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. Her feet ached, her head throbbed from champagne and stress, and her entire life had been turned upside down in the space of 3 hours. She stripped off her diner uniform in the bathroom, letting it fall to the marble floor. The shower was larger than her apartment's bathroom, with multiple heads and controls she didn't understand. She turned the water as hot as she could stand, letting it pound against her shoulders and wash away the terror and confusion of the night. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that felt like clouds, she found clothing laid out on the bed. Not the designer clothes from the closet, but soft pajama pants and a simple t-shirt that looked more comfortable than fashionable. Rosa's doing, probably. Sophia dressed and crawled into the enormous bed, sinking into mattress and pillows that cradled her like a gentle embrace. She should be afraid, should be planning her escape, should be wondering what price Marco Castellano would eventually demand for his protection. Instead, for the first time in months, she felt safe enough to close her eyes without fear of what morning would bring. She was asleep in minutes. Sophia woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a moment of panic before memory returned. The wedding. Marco. The mansion. She sat up, taking in the blue guest suite in daylight even more beautiful than she'd realized, with its delicate wallpaper and fresh flowers on the dresser. A clock on the nightstand read 9:30. She'd slept for nearly 10 hours. Someone had entered while she slept, leaving a tray on the table by the window. Coffee, still steaming, fresh fruit and pastries, orange juice in a crystal glass. Sophia approached it like it might be a mirage, but everything was real and present, and probably more expensive than any breakfast she'd ever made herself. She was halfway through a croissant that melted on her tongue like butter-flavored air when someone knocked on the door. "Come in," she called, expecting Rosa. Instead, Marco entered, and Sophia nearly choked on her coffee. He'd changed from his tuxedo into casual clothes, dark jeans, and a black sweater that somehow made him look even more dangerous than formal wear had. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd recently showered, and stubble shadowed his jaw. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept at all. "Good morning," he said, his voice rougher than it had been last night. "I hope you slept well. Better than I have in months." Sophia set down her coffee cup, suddenly self-conscious in her borrowed pajamas, with her hair tangled from sleep. "You look exhausted. Busy night." He moved to the window, gazing out at the gardens below. "I've had men searching for Tyler Brennan since midnight. He's disappeared. Probably gone to ground with his Giordano contacts. I'm sorry. I never meant to bring this kind of trouble. Don't." Marco turned to face her, and the intensity in his dark eyes stole her breath. "You didn't bring trouble, Sophia. You stumbled into a war that's been brewing for years. Tyler targeted you because you were vulnerable and had potential access to my operations. None of this is your fault. But I'm dragging you into my mess. You're not dragging me anywhere. I'm choosing to protect you." He crossed the space between them, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Do you understand the difference?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Why? You don't even know me." "I know enough." His hand lifted, hovering near her face like he wanted to touch her but was holding himself back. "I know you're brave enough to run toward danger when cornered. I know you're smart enough to recognize an opportunity when you see one. I know you've been surviving on your own for a long time, fighting battles that would have broken most people." His thumb finally made contact, brushing across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "And I know that when I walked back into the restaurant last night and saw you sitting there, looking lost and defiant and terrified all at once, something in my chest shifted, something that hasn't moved in a very long time." Sophia couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at this dangerous, complicated man who was looking at her like she was something precious he'd found in the wreckage of his violent world. "Marco." A sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. Marco stepped back, his expression shifting from vulnerable to controlled in an instant. "Enter." Luca appeared, his face grim. "Boss, we have a problem. The Giordanos just made a move on the waterfront warehouse. 3 of our men are down, and they're demanding a meeting." Marco's jaw tightened. When? Tonight. Neutral territory. They're claiming they want to negotiate a peace settlement. It's a trap. Probably. Luca's eyes flicked to Sophia, then back to Marco. They specifically mentioned the girl. Said if you want to avoid more bloodshed, you'll bring her to the meeting. Sophia's blood turned to ice. They want me? They want leverage, Marco corrected, his voice hard as granite. Which they won't get. Tell the Giordanos I'll meet them, but Sophia stays here under guard. Non-negotiable. Marco, if this is about me, maybe I should. No. The single word cracked like a whip. You're not going anywhere near the Giordanos. Is that clear? His tone should have angered her, should have reminded her of Tyler's controlling behavior, of the way he'd tried to dictate every aspect of her life. But somehow, this felt different. Marco wasn't trying to control her, he was trying to protect her. And the fierce determination in his eyes made something warm unfold in her chest. Okay, she said quietly. I'll stay here. Some of the tension left his shoulders. He turned back to Luca. Double the security. I want men on every entrance, cameras monitoring every approach. If the Giordanos try anything while I'm at this meeting, they'll regret it, Luca finished. I'll make the arrangements. After Luca left, Marco lingered in the doorway. I need to prepare for this meeting. Rosa will stay with you, and I'm leaving 6 of my best men to guard the house. He paused. I'll be back before midnight. Be careful, Sophia said, surprised by how much she meant it. His smile was brief, but genuine. Always. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the remains of her breakfast, and the unsettling realization that somewhere in the past 12 hours, she'd started to care what happened to Marco Castellano, and that was far more dangerous than any rival mob family. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Rosa tried to keep Sophia occupied, offering to show her the house, the gardens, the library filled with first editions that probably cost more than luxury cars. But Sophia couldn't focus on anything except the approaching night and the meeting where Marco would walk into potential danger because of her. Because Tyler had targeted her. Because she'd run into the Castello. Because Marco had decided she was worth protecting. By 8 p.m., Sophia was pacing the blue guest suite like a caged animal. Rosa had brought dinner some kind of gourmet pasta that tasted like ash in her mouth, and tactfully retreated after Sophia picked at it listlessly. Through the windows, she could see guards patrolling the grounds. Luca had been true to his word, the security presence was overwhelming, but it didn't make her feel safer. If anything, it emphasized how much danger she was in, how her presence had turned Marco's fortress into a potential war zone. At 9:30, her borrowed phone rang. Rosa had given it to her that afternoon, along with strict instructions to only answer calls from approved numbers. Marco's name flashed across the screen. Hello? Sophia answered, her heart racing. Are you all right? His voice was tight with tension. Fine. Safe. How's the meeting? Still in progress. Background noise. And suggested he was outside, away from whoever he'd been negotiating with. The Giordanos are posturing, making threats, demanding concessions they know I won't give. What do they want? A pause. You. Sophia's stomach dropped. Marco. They're claiming you're a spy who's been feeding me information about their operations. They want you handed over for questioning. The way he said that last word made it clear what kind of questioning the Giordanos had in mind. Maybe if I just talked to them, explained that I don't know anything. They'd torture you for information you don't have, then kill you to tie up loose ends. Marco's voice was flat, matter of fact. That's not happening. But if giving me up would stop this war, Sophia, he cut her off sharply. Listen to me very carefully. I am not giving you up. Not to save face, not to prevent bloodshed, not for any reason whatsoever. You're under my protection, which means you're mine to protect. Do you understand? You're mine to protect. The words sent heat flooding through her despite their possessive edge. I understand. Good. I'll be home in 2 hours. Don't open the door for anyone except Rosa or Luca. And Sophia? His voice softened fractionally. Thank you for worrying about me. It's been a long time since anyone did that. The call ended before she could respond. Sophia stared at the phone, her emotions a tangled mess. She barely knew this man, had met him less than 24 hours ago. Yet somehow, he'd become her anchor in a storm she didn't understand. The only solid thing in a world that had turned deadly and complicated overnight. She should be planning her escape. Should be calling the police, her sister in Michigan, anyone who could extract her from this dangerous situation. Instead, She was counting the minutes until Marco came home, wanting nothing more than to see for herself that he was safe and whole and unharmed. God help her, but she was already falling for Marco Castellano, and that terrified her more than any mob war ever could. Sophia heard the cars before she saw them. The crunch of gravel on the driveway, multiple engines cutting off simultaneously, car doors slamming with purposeful force. She rushed to the window, her heart leaping when she recognized Marco's Bentley among the vehicles. He emerged from the car moving stiffly, and even from the second floor, Sophia could see the tension in his shoulders. Luca and 4 other men flanked him, all of them scanning the grounds with the hypervigilance of soldiers returning from battle. They were unharmed, at least visibly, but something about their formation suggested the meeting hadn't gone well. Sophia was halfway to the door when she stopped herself. What was she doing? Planning to run downstairs like some worried housewife waiting for her husband to return from work? She barely knew Marco, had no claim on him, no right to act like his safety mattered to her beyond simple human concern. But her feet carried her into the hallway anyway. She made it to the top of the grand staircase just as Marco entered through the front doors. He looked up, and their eyes locked. For a moment, everything else, the guards, the danger, the complications faded away. There was only Marco's dark gaze drinking her in like she was water, and he'd been wandering a desert. Sophia, just her name, but the way he said it made her knees weak. Come down here. It wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in need, and Sophia found herself descending the staircase without conscious thought. When she reached the bottom, Marco was there, his hands framing her face with a possessiveness that should have alarmed her, but instead made her feel claimed in the best possible way. "You're okay," she breathed, her hands coming up to grip his wrists. "I was so worried. I told you I'd come back." His thumb traced her lower lip, his eyes following the movement with dark intensity. "Did you doubt me? I didn't want you getting hurt because of me." Something fierce flashed in his expression. "Sophia, men have been trying to hurt me since I was 16 years old. The Giordanos are nothing I can't handle." His forehead dropped to rest against hers, and she felt him take a shuddering breath. "But walking into that meeting knowing they wanted to get their hands on you, knowing what they'd do if they succeeded, that tested every ounce of control I possess." "What happened at the meeting?" Marco pulled back, his jaw tightening. "We need to talk, somewhere private." He glanced at Luca, who nodded once and began directing the other guards to their posts. Then Marco took Sophia's hand and led her toward the back of the house. They entered what appeared to be his private office, all dark wood and leather furniture, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. The desk was enormous, its surface covered with papers and laptops and objects that looked both expensive and functional. This was where Marco ran his empire, both legitimate and otherwise. He guided her to a leather sofa and sat beside her, close enough that their thighs touched. "The Giordanos made their position clear tonight. They believe you've been spying on them for me, feeding me information about their operations, their weaknesses, their plans. But I haven't. I didn't even know who you were until last night. I know that. You know that. But Tyler Brennan has apparently convinced them otherwise." Marco's hand found hers, his fingers lacing through hers with surprising gentleness. "He claims you've been working for me for months, that the catering jobs were covers for intelligence gathering, that your relationship with him was a ruse to get close to his Giordano contacts." Sophia's head spun. "That's insane. Why would he lie like that?" "Because he's trying to save his own skin." Marco's expression was grim. "Tyler was supposed to be gathering intelligence about my operations through you. Instead, he apparently fell for you, got obsessed, possessive, lost sight of his mission. When you left him, he panicked, started making mistakes. The Giordanos discovered his incompetence and were about to eliminate him. So he created a fiction where you're the real spy, and he was the victim of my manipulation. And they believed him? They want to believe him. Because if they accept that Tyler is lying, it means they wasted 2 years on a failed operation and need to execute one of their own people. It's easier to believe I'm the villain." Marco's thumb stroked across her knuckles in an absent, soothing gesture. "They've given me 72 hours to turn you over. If I don't, they'll consider it an act of war." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "Marco, you should just... don't." His voice went hard as steel. "Don't even suggest it. I told you before, and I'll tell you again, I'm not giving you up. Not now, not ever. But a war, people will die. People die in my world all the time, Sophia. That's the reality of what I am, what I do." He turned to face her fully, his free hand cupping her cheek. "I've made a lot of terrible choices in my life. Hurt people who probably didn't deserve it. built an empire on violence and fear. But protecting you? Choosing to keep you safe even if it means war? That's the first truly good decision I've made in years, and I'm not walking it back. Tears burned behind Sophia's eyes. I don't understand why. Why me? I'm nobody. Just a waitress drowning in debt who happened to run into your restaurant. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. You're not nobody. Marco's intensity was almost overwhelming. You're a woman who's been surviving impossible circumstances with grace and strength, who put herself through culinary school while caring for a dying mother, who works 3 jobs and still finds time to smile at strangers in a diner, who ran from one danger straight into another and still managed to keep her head high and her dignity intact. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. You're extraordinary, Sophia Martinez, and the fact that you don't see it makes you even more so. A tear escaped, trailing down her cheek. Marco caught it with his thumb, his touch unbearably gentle for a man capable of such violence. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, but you're safe here. I have 30 men guarding this property, security systems that would make the Pentagon jealous. And even if somehow the Giordanos manage to breach every defense, which they won't, they'd have to go through me first. His eyes held hers with absolute conviction. And I promise you, Sophia, I will burn this entire city to ashes before I let anyone hurt you. The vow should have sounded insane, melodramatic, but looking into Marco's eyes, Sophia knew he meant every word. This man, this dangerous, complicated, powerful man, had decided she was worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth going to war over. And God help her, but she wanted him to. What happens now? She asked. Now we prepare. The Giordanos will make their move before the 72 hours are up. That's just theater for the other families, maintaining the illusion that they're following protocol. My guess is they'll try something tomorrow night. He stood, pulling her up with him. Which means we need to move you to a more secure location. More secure than this? This house is a fortress, but it's also a known location. I own a property outside the city, a farmhouse surrounded by 50 acres of open land. Easier to defend, harder to approach undetected. His hand tightened on hers. I'll take you there personally. We leave at dawn. Sophia's mind raced. This was real. This was actually happening. She was about to go into hiding because a mob family wanted her dead, protected by a man who'd inserted himself into her life less than 24 hours ago and was now willing to start a war for her. Marco, I need to know something. She forced herself to meet his eyes. When this is over, when the Giordanos are dealt with and Tyler's not a threat anymore, what happens to me? Do I just go back to my life? Pretend none of this happened? His expression went very still. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want. The admission felt dangerous, exposing. Everything's happened so fast. Yesterday I was just worried about making rent. Now I'm at the center of a mob war, hiding in a mansion, protected by a man who... She stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. A man who what? Marco prompted, stepping closer. A man who looks at me like I matter. She finished quietly. Like I'm something precious instead of something disposable. And I don't know if that's real or if it's just adrenaline and danger making everything feel more intense than it actually is. Marco was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I've known you for less than a day, Sophia. By any rational measure, what I'm feeling right now makes no sense. But I learned a long time ago that feelings don't follow logic. His hand came up to cradle her face. I want you safe. I want you protected. But more than that, I want you to stay. Not because you're afraid or because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to be here, with me. Her breath caught. Marco, I'm not asking for an answer now. You're right that everything's moving too fast, that the danger is distorting reality. But when this is over, when you're safe, and you have time to think clearly, I want you to consider staying. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I want you to consider being mine, not as property or an obligation, but as a partner. As someone I protect, not because I have to, but because losing you would destroy me. The confession hung between them, raw and honest and terrifying in its intensity. Sophia should pull back, should tell him this was crazy, that people didn't fall for each other this fast. That whatever he thought he felt was just protective instinct amplified by adrenaline. Instead, she rose up on her toes and kissed him. Marco froze for a heartbeat, then made a low sound in his throat and pulled her against him. His mouth was demanding, possessive, claiming her with a hunger that made her knees weak. One hand fisted in her hair while the other splayed across the small of her back, holding her close enough that she could feel his heart hammering against her chest. The kiss tasted like desperation and promise, like all the words they hadn't said and all the feelings neither of them were quite ready to name. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco rested his forehead against hers. "Sophia," he breathed, and his voice was wrecked. "You have no idea what you do to me." "Maybe I'm starting to figure it out," she whispered back. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, the world narrowing down to just the two of them and the electric current running between their bodies. Then Marco's phone buzzed, shattering the intimacy. He cursed softly and pulled it from his pocket, his expression darkening as he read the screen. "Luca, there's been a development." "What kind of development?" "Tyler Brennan just turned up at Chicago Police Headquarters. He's requesting protective custody and claiming he has information about my criminal enterprises." Marco's smile was cold and utterly without humor. "The Giordanos are getting desperate. They're trying to use the law against me since direct confrontation failed." "Can they do that? Can Tyler actually hurt you by talking to the police?" "He can try, but I have half the police department on my payroll, and the other half knows better than to come after me without ironclad evidence." Marco pocketed his phone and turned back. To her, "This doesn't change our plans. We still leave at dawn, but it does mean we need to move faster than I anticipated." "How much faster?" "We leave in 2 hours." His hand found hers again, squeezing gently. "Rosa will help you pack. Bring only what you absolutely need. We'll have everything else you want delivered to the farmhouse." Sophia nodded, trying to process the rapid shift in plans. 2 hours. She had 2 hours to prepare for. What? Going into hiding? Starting a new life? Committing herself to a man she'd just met but somehow couldn't imagine walking away from? "Hey." Marco tipped her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you're scared. But I promise you, no matter what happens in the next few days, I will keep you safe. That's not negotiable." "I believe you," she said, and meant it. The smile he gave her was brief but genuine. "Good. Now go pack." "And Sophia?" He pulled her close for one more quick, fierce kiss. "When this is over, I'm taking you on a proper date. Dinner, wine, conversation that doesn't involve mob wars or protective custody. Something normal." She laughed despite everything. "I'm not sure normal exists in your world. Then we'll create our own version of it." His expression softened. "You deserve that. You deserve so much more than what life's given you. And I intend to make sure you get it." 2 hours later, Sophia found herself in the back of Marco's Bentley, watching the Chicago skyline disappear behind them as they drove northwest into the darkness. Rosa had helped her pack with efficient kindness, selecting clothes from the guest suite closet and adding personal items. Sophia hadn't even thought to request books, art supplies, comfort items that suggested the farmhouse might become home for longer than a few days. Marco sat beside her, one hand resting on her thigh in a gesture that was more reassuring than sexual. Luca drove while 3 other cars full of guards followed in a protective convoy. Through the tinted windows, Sophia watched the city give way to suburbs, then to rural farmland dotted with sleeping houses. "Tell me about the farmhouse," she said, needing to break the tense silence. Marco's thumb stroked absently against her leg. "It was my grandfather's property. He bought it in the 1950s as a legitimate business venture, actually grew crops, raised animals, played at being a gentleman farmer. After he died, my father wanted to sell it, but I convinced him to let me keep it." A slight smile touched his lips. "It's the only place I own that has nothing to do with the family business. Just land and a house and peace. You go there often?" "Not as much as I'd like. Maybe a few times a year when the weight of Chicago gets too heavy." He glanced at her. "You'll like it. There's an old barn that's been converted into an art studio. My grandmother was a painter. She spent her last years there, creating." Sophia's heart squeezed. "An art studio? Complete with easels, supplies, natural lighting, everything a painter could want." His eyes held hers. "I thought you might enjoy it. While we're hiding from mob war, you could create something beautiful." The thoughtfulness of the gesture made tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." They drove in comfortable silence for another 30 minutes before turning onto a long gravel driveway flanked by tall oaks. The farmhouse appeared at the end, a sprawling 2-story structure with white clapboard siding and a wraparound porch. Warm light glowed from the windows, suggesting someone had prepared for their arrival. "It's beautiful," Sophia breathed. "Wait until you see it in daylight." Marco helped her from the car as guards took up positions around the property. The sunrise here is something worth waking up for. Inside, the farmhouse was nothing like Marco's Chicago mansion. Where that property screamed wealth and power, this one whispered comfort and history. Hardwood floors worn, smooth by generations of footsteps, furniture that looked inherited rather than purchased. Family photographs on the walls showing Castellanos from decades past, their faces stern but their eyes warm. The master bedroom is upstairs, Marco said, guiding her toward the staircase. Your room is next to mine. Private bathroom, everything you need. Where will you sleep? Where? He paused mid-step. I was planning to take the room next door. Why? Sophia's heart hammered. She knew what she was about to suggest was reckless, possibly stupid, definitely too fast. But standing in this beautiful house with danger circling outside and Marco Castellano looking at her like she hung the moon, she couldn't bring herself to care about caution. Stay with me, she said quietly. I don't want to be alone tonight. Marco went very still. Sophia, if I stay in your room tonight, I'm not sure I'll be able to keep my hands to myself. And you've been through too much too fast. I don't want to take advantage. You're not. She stepped closer, placing her hand over his heart. I'm asking. I'm choosing this. Maybe it's too fast. Maybe I'll regret it in the morning. But right now all I know is that when I'm with you, I feel safe and wanted and like I matter. She took a shaky breath. I haven't felt that way in a very long time. His hand covered hers, pressing it more firmly against his chest where she could feel his heart racing. You're sure? I'm sure. The kiss he gave her was different from before, slower, deeper, full of promise rather than desperation. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were dark with desire but also something softer, something that looked almost like reverence. Then I'm yours tonight, he said. And every night after, if you'll have me. They climbed the stairs together, leaving the guards to their vigil and the world to its chaos. Whatever tomorrow brought, mob wars, police investigations, Tyler's revenge tonight was theirs alone. And in the farmhouse, where Marco's grandmother had once created beauty from paint and canvas, Sophia and Marco created something equally profound from danger and attraction and the desperate human need for connection in the face of darkness. By the time the sun rose over the Illinois countryside, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Sophia lay wrapped in Marco's arms, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. She should be terrified, should be planning her exit strategy, should be recognizing that she'd just committed herself to a dangerous man in an even more dangerous situation. Instead, she felt like she'd finally come home. The next 3 days existed in a strange bubble of domesticity and danger. During the daylight hours, Sophia explored the farmhouse and its grounds, always accompanied by at least 2 guards. She discovered Marco's grandmother's art studio in the converted barn and spent hours painting for the first time in years, losing herself in color and light while her mind processed everything that had happened. Marco divided his time between phone calls with his lieutenants in Chicago and moments of surprising normalcy with Sophia. They cooked breakfast together in the farmhouse kitchen, him surprisingly competent with a knife, her finally getting to use her culinary training for something other than survival. They walked the property at sunset, his hand wrapped around hers, talking about everything from childhood memories to dreams for the future. And at night, they retreated to the master bedroom where the outside world couldn't reach them, where mob wars and dangerous exes ceased to exist, where there was only Marco's hands on her skin and his whispered promises against her throat, and the overwhelming sense that whatever this was between them, it was real and profound and worth fighting for. But the bubble couldn't last forever. On the 4th morning, Sophia woke to find Marco already dressed, his expression grim as he stared at his phone. What's wrong? She asked, sitting up and pulling the sheet around herself. The Giordanos made their move. His voice was flat, controlled, but she could hear the fury underneath. They hit 3 of my warehouses last night, burned them to the ground. 6 of my men are in the hospital, 2 more are dead. Sophia's blood ran cold. Oh my God. They're forcing my hand, escalating until I either give you up or go to war. Marco finally looked at her, and the conflict in his eyes was painful to witness. I need to go back to Chicago, handle this personally. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You're safer here, Marco. She climbed out of bed, not caring that she was naked, and crossed to where he stood. If you're going back to fight a war that's happening because of me, I'm not staying here hiding while you risk your life. Sophia, the Giordanos want you. Walking into Chicago is exactly what they're hoping for, then we give them what they want. An idea was forming in her mind, reckless and probably insane, but it might be the only way to end this without more people dying. We set a trap. Make them think they're getting me, but it's actually an ambush. Marco stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You want to use yourself as bait? I want to stop people from dying because of me. I want this to end. She grabbed his hand, squeezing tightly. Marco, you said yourself the Giordanos are getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. If we can draw them out, make them overconfident, maybe we can end this without it becoming a full-scale war. And if something goes wrong, if they manage to actually get their hands on you, they won't, because you'll be there. She looked up at him, trying to convey the absolute trust she felt. I know you won't let anything happen to me. Marco was silent for a long moment, clearly torn between his protective instincts and the strategic value of her plan. Finally, he pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with almost crushing force. If we do this, if I agree to this insane plan, you follow my orders exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. You do what I say, when I say it, without question. Understood? Understood. And if at any point I think you're in real danger, the plan ends, and you go back into hiding. Non-negotiable. Agreed. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his expression fierce. Sophia Martinez, you're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the craziest. I haven't decided which. She managed a shaky smile. Can't I be both? Despite everything, he laughed. Yes, you can. Then his expression sobered. I love you. I know it's too soon. I know it doesn't make sense, but I love you. And if anything happens to you because of this plan, nothing's going to happen to me. She rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring every ounce of her own feelings into it. When she pulled back, she whispered, I love you too. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I can't hide here while you fight my battles. His eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, they held a mixture of love and terror and grim determination. Then we do this together, as partners. As partners, she echoed. 24 hours later, Sophia found herself in the back of a different car, dressed in clothes Rosa had selected for maximum visibility, a red coat that would stand out in any crowd, and her dark hair loose around her shoulders. They were approaching a warehouse in an industrial area of Chicago's South Side, the kind of place where screams went unheard and bodies disappeared without questions asked. Marco sat beside her, his hand wrapped around hers with almost bruising force. Last chance to back out, he said. Not backing out. The Giordanos think they're getting you in exchange for peace negotiations. What they're actually getting is 30 of my best men positioned throughout the warehouse, plus sniper support from the surrounding buildings. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. You walk in. I'll be right behind you. The moment they make their move, my men move first. And Tyler? If he's there, he's a dead man. Marco's voice was utterly without mercy. For what he did to you, for the lies he told, for every moment of fear he put you through, he dies tonight. Sophia should probably object to the casual discussion of murder, should feel something other than grim satisfaction at the thought of Tyler finally facing consequences. But months of terror and manipulation had burned away her capacity for mercy where he was concerned. Good, she said simply. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark and its exterior scarred by decades of industrial use. Luca pulled up to the main entrance, and Sophia could see figures moving in the shadows, Giordano soldiers, weapons visible even in the dim light. Ready? Marco asked. Sophia took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and nodded. Ready. They exited the car together, and immediately, a dozen weapons trained on them. A man emerged from the warehouse entrance 50s, silver hair, expensive suit that couldn't quite hide his predatory nature. Antonio Giordano, head of the family. Marco, he called, his voice carrying false joviality. So good of you to see reason. And you brought the girl. Excellent. Let's skip the pleasantries, Antonio. Marco's hand remained on Sophia's lower back, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. You wanted a meeting. We're here. What are your terms? Antonio's smile widened. Simple. You give us the girl. We question her about the information she's passed you about our operations. Then, assuming she cooperates, we consider this matter settled. And if she doesn't cooperate? The smile turned cruel. Then she stops being your problem and becomes fertilizer for the Illinois farmland. Either way, you walk away clean, and we avoid a costly war. Marco's laugh was cold. You think I drove 2 hours to hand over the woman I love so you can torture and kill her? Antonio, I expected better strategic thinking from you. Antonio's expression darkened. Then why are you here? To give you one chance to walk away. Marco's voice dropped, becoming something deadly. Sophia Martinez is under my protection. That makes her untouchable. If you want war, we'll have war. But it ends with the Giordano family extinct, and your territories absorbed into mine. This is your last opportunity to avoid that outcome. Bold words for a man outnumbered 3-1. Am I, though? Marco smiled, and it was terrifying. Luca, if you would? Luca raised his phone, and suddenly the warehouse was flooded with light. Sophia watched as Giordano soldiers realized they were surrounded. Marco's men emerging from shadows, snipers visible on rooftops, escape routes blocked by black SUVs. Antonio's face went white with fury. You set a trap. I set a reckoning. Marco's hand tightened on Sophia's back. Every man who participated in burning my warehouses dies tonight. Every soldier who thought they could threaten what's mine learns the cost. And you, Antonio, you learn that the Castellano family doesn't negotiate with terrorists. Tyler Brennan, Antonio shouted. Get out here. Tell them what you told us. A figure emerged from the warehouse, and Sophia's entire body went rigid. Tyler looked thinner than she remembered, his hair unkempt, and his eyes wild with desperation. When his gaze landed on her, something ugly and possessive twisted his features. Sophia, he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone that used to make her freeze. Baby, I'm so glad you're okay. This monster has been holding you captive, hasn't he? Using you, manipulating you. Stop. Sophia stepped forward, shaking off Marco's protective hand. Just stop lying, Tyler. I'm not lying. I'm trying to save you. You tried to have me kidnapped. You stalked me for months. You planted yourself in my life to spy on. Marco's operations for the Giordanos then turned on them when they discovered how incompetent you were. Her voice rang out clear and strong in the warehouse. You're a liar, Tyler. A manipulative, abusive liar. And I'm done being afraid of you. Tyler's expression shifted from pleading to vicious in a heartbeat. You stupid bitch. You think you're safe with him? He's a killer, a criminal, and you're a dead man. Marco's voice was utterly calm. For putting your hands on her, for making her afraid, for every moment of terror you inflicted. That's not a threat, Tyler. That's a promise. Antonio. Tyler spun toward the Giordano boss. You promised me protection. You said. I said a lot of things. Antonio's gun appeared with fluid grace, pressing against Tyler's temple. Most of them were lies. You're a liability, Brennan. And I don't keep liabilities alive. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse like thunder. Tyler dropped, dead before he hit the ground. Sophia should feel something horror, relief, satisfaction. Instead, she felt nothing. Just a strange emptiness where fear and anger had lived for so long. Tyler Brennan was dead, and with him died the last chains binding her to a life she'd hated. Now then, Antonio turned his gun toward Marco, though his hand was shaking slightly. Shall we discuss terms? The only terms are your surrender. Marco's men had closed in, creating a perimeter that made Antonio's numerical advantage irrelevant. You attempted to violate the protection I extended to Sophia. You burned my property and killed my people. Those crimes require restitution. What kind of restitution? Your territory south of Roosevelt Road, your shipping contracts through the harbor, and your youngest son serves as collateral for 5 years to ensure your good behavior. Antonio's face went purple with rage. You're demanding my empire and my child. I'm offering you your life and the lives of everyone in this warehouse. That's more mercy than you showed my people. Marco's expression was implacable. Accept the terms, or die tonight. Choose now. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Sophia could see the calculation in Antonio's eyes, weighing pride against survival, legacy against extinction. Around them, weapons remained trained on targets, fingers resting lightly on triggers, waiting for the order to fire. Finally, Antonio lowered his gun. I accept. The tension broke like a fever. Marco nodded once, and his men lowered their weapons fractionally. Wise choice. Luca will coordinate the transfer of assets. You have 48 hours to vacate the Roosevelt properties. And my son will be treated with respect appropriate to his position as guarantee of our accord. Marco's tone suggested this wasn't negotiable. Harm comes to any of mine. Harm comes to him. Simple. Antonio looked like he wanted to argue, but he'd lost and everyone in the warehouse knew it. He nodded curtly, then gestured to his men. They retreated toward their vehicles, leaving Tyler's body on the concrete floor like discarded trash. When the last Giordano vehicle disappeared into the Chicago night, Sophia finally allowed herself to breathe. Marco was beside her immediately, his hands running over her like he needed to confirm she was whole and unharmed. "Are you okay?" he demanded. "I'm fine. Better than fine." She looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd gone to war for her, who'd just dismantled an enemy empire to keep her safe. "It's over?" "It's over." He pulled her close, his embrace almost crushing in its intensity. "You were magnificent, brave and strong and absolutely terrifying. I've never been more proud of anyone in my life. I couldn't have done it without you. You shouldn't have had to do it at all." His lips pressed against her temple. "But it's finished now. Tyler's dead. The Giordanos are broken. And you're safe. Finally, completely safe." Sophia buried her face in his chest, letting the reality of safety, real, permanent safety, wash over her. No more looking over her shoulder. No more fear that Tyler would appear. No more wondering if tonight would be the night he finally snapped and hurt her beyond repair. She was free, and she was loved by a man who'd proven with actions rather than words that she mattered more than territory, more than pride, more than anything else in his violent world. "Take me home," she whispered against his heart. "Which home? The mansion or the farmhouse?" She pulled back to meet his eyes. "Whichever one you'll be in. That's home now." The smile he gave her was brilliant and unguarded, showing the man beneath the mob boss for just a moment. "Then let's go home, Sophia Martinez. Let's go home and start the rest of our lives." 6 months later, Sophia wiped flour from her hands and stepped back to admire the cake she'd just finished decorating. 3 tiers of chocolate and vanilla, covered in buttercream roses that had taken her 2 hours to pipe. It was for a wedding, not a mob wedding this time, but a legitimate celebration for one of Marco's construction managers and his fiancée. The catering business she'd opened 3 months ago was thriving. Turns out that being known as Marco Castellano's girlfriend, no, fiancée, she corrected herself, glancing at the sapphire ring that never left her finger, came with certain advantages. People paid their invoices on time. Vendors gave her their best products at fair prices. And nobody, absolutely nobody, tried to cheat or manipulate her. The kitchen door opened, and Marco entered, loosening his tie with one hand. He'd been in meetings all day, negotiating a new construction contract with the city. Legitimate business, all above board, though Sophia knew he still maintained the less legal aspects of his empire. That was his world, and she'd accepted it along with accepting him. "Something smells amazing," he said, crossing the room to wrap his arms around her from behind. "Wedding cake for the Morrison wedding tomorrow." She leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid warmth of him. "How were the meetings?" "Productive. The city council approved the waterfront development project. Groundbreaking next month." His lips found the sensitive spot below her ear. "Which means I'll be very busy for the next few weeks. Might need my brilliant fiancé to accompany me to several boring dinner meetings to keep me sane. I suppose I could make time in my schedule." She turned in his arms, looping her hands around his neck. "Though you'll owe me, those dinner meetings are deadly dull. I'll make it up to you." His kiss was slow and thorough, tasting of promises. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were serious. "I heard from Antonio Giordano today. His son completes his service term next month. He wants to know if we're satisfied with their compliance." Sophia had almost forgotten about the Giordanos. The treaty had held. Antonio had surrendered his territories as promised, and his son had served his time as collateral without incident. The mob war that could have consumed Chicago had been avoided. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd discuss it with you." Marco's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "You're the one who was most affected by their actions. You should have input on whether we extend the treaty or continue holding leverage." The fact that he consulted her on such decisions still surprised Sophia sometimes. Marco didn't run his empire democratically, but when it came to matters that affected her or affected them as a couple, he always asked her opinion. "Let his son go home," she said. "The Giordanos kept their word. No need to punish them further." Marco nodded. "I was hoping you'd say that. Antonio's been surprisingly compliant. Might be worth establishing a more permanent peace." They stood together in the kitchen, surrounded by the smells of sugar and vanilla, discussing mob politics like other couples might discuss vacation plans. It should feel surreal, but somehow it didn't. This was their life now, a strange blend of legitimate business and underworld power, of catering jobs and territory negotiations, of love built from danger and choice rather than circumstance. "I have something for you," Marco said, pulling a small envelope from his pocket. Sophia opened it to find 2 tickets to Florence, Italy. What's this? Our honeymoon. I know we haven't set a wedding date yet, but I wanted you to have something to look forward to. 2 weeks in Tuscany, art museums, cooking classes, vineyards, no mob business, no Chicago, just us. Tears pricked her eyes. Marco, this is not enough. Will never be enough for what you've given me. He cupped her face in his hands. You took a broken, violent man and made him want to be better. You walked into my world and somehow made it brighter. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Sophia Martinez, and I intend to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. You already are. She kissed him, pouring 6 months of love and trust and partnership into it. You saved me, Marco. Not just from Tyler, but from a life where I'd stopped believing good things could happen. You gave me safety and love and a future I never thought I'd have. We saved each other, he corrected. You think I was really living before you crashed into my life? I was just existing, going through motions, building an empire but having no one to share it with. His forehead pressed against hers. You gave me a reason to come home at night, a reason to want tomorrow, a reason to imagine a future that wasn't just power and control. They held each other in the kitchen of her catering business. This space she'd created with his support and encouragement, this life they were building together from the ashes of their separate pasts. Outside, Chicago continued its endless dance of light and shadow, crime and commerce, danger and opportunity. But in here, wrapped in Marco's arms with the scent of vanilla and the promise of Italian honeymoons, Sophia finally understood what home really meant. It wasn't a place. It wasn't safety or security or even love, though those were all part of it. Home was choosing someone every single day, especially when that choice was complicated and messy, and required accepting both the good and the dangerous in equal measure. Home was Marco Castellano, looking at her like she'd hung the moon while discussing mob treaties in a commercial kitchen. Home was this imperfect, unlikely, absolutely perfect life they'd created together. I love you, she whispered. I love you more, he replied. Now come on, let's close up shop and go home. Rosa's making osso buco tonight, and if we're late, she'll lecture us for an hour. Sophia laughed, locked up her kitchen, and followed Marco out into the Chicago evening. Behind them, a wedding cake waited for tomorrow's celebration. Ahead of them, an entire future waited to be lived. And for the first time in her entire life, Sophia couldn't wait to see what came next. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So, if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel.